Hi, this is Chef Corey with Sodexo, Richland School District 2's food service partner. We're making a healthier red velvet cake here today. All right, so here's our ingredients for the red velvet cake. We've got maple syrup, cocoa powder, coconut oil, eggs, apple cider vinegar, coconut sugar, almond flour, sea salt, baking soda, almond extract, vanilla extract, red food coloring, coconut flour, tapioca flour, cream cheese, coconut milk, and Greek vanilla yogurt. First thing we're going to do is take our cake pans. You can either do a 2 or a 3 layer cake. Personally, I like, as I've gotten older, I seem to like the cake more than the icing. So I prefer 2 layer because I feel like you get more cake to it. But if you like the icing more, feel free to make a 3 layer cake. Doesn't really change anything other than the fact that you need 3 cake pans instead of the 2 that I'm using today. We'll start off by taking maybe about a teaspoon of coconut oil and putting it in our cake pan. And we'll just take a pastry brush, kind of gently brush it around, making sure that we cover both the bottom and the sides. All right. And then I have taken some parchment paper and cut it to the size of the bottom of the pan. This will help you get your cake out more easily once it's done baking. You're just going to want to take it, press it down in there, make sure it sticks with the oil, and you'll want to repeat that on your other pan. All right, next, we're going to begin our mixing process. And we begin with, we've got a can of coconut milk. Now it's most likely separated in the can, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and get it mixed back together first. As I'm sure you can see, there's a solid and a liquid part, and we want to make sure that this is all nice and smooth and creamy. All right, so we'll just turn it on. You want to just let this mix for maybe a minute or so until it's nice and smooth. There's no chunks in there. All right, now that we've got our coconut milk all mixed back together, we'll begin adding the rest of our wet ingredients. Got 2/3 of a cup of water. 1½ tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, about a ½ teaspoon of almond extract, 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, red food coloring. Use about an ounce of this, which is 2 tablespoons. I recommend using gloves because this stuff stains everything. And our last wet ingredient is 4 eggs. And I'm going to change out my gloves because I just got egg all over them. All right, now that we've got all of our wet ingredients together, we'll go ahead and turn it on low. You want to start on low so that nothing splashes out, especially since you have red food coloring in there. Depending upon what it hits, it may or may not come off. All right, now that we've kind of got it mixed up a little bit, we can crank up the power just a little bit. Now that that's well mixed, we'll begin mixing all of our dry ingredients. All right, our dry ingredients are 3 3/4 cup of almond flour, 1 2/3 cup tapioca starch, 1/3 of a cup of coconut flour, 1 cup of coconut sugar, 1 teaspoon of sea salt, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Actually, this is probably about 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder. I find that when making a red velvet cake, I always add about an extra tablespoon of cocoa powder. I just like mine a little bit more chocolatey. All right, and we will mix these ingredients together. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is getting mixed in with your wet ingredients, so nobody's really gonna see this part. But it does help to have it kind of mixed together so that you don't end up with big clumps of any one ingredient in your batter. All right, and we'll begin adding the dry mix into our wet mix little by little. I'd say maybe add a third to a quarter to a third of your dry mix into the wet mix. And then just start it on low power so, again, we don't kick anything out of the bowl and make a mess. And if you want, you can begin just kind of slowly while it's mixing, putting little by little your dry mix into the wet mix. And the reason you don't do it all at once is it's a lot easier for a liquid mix to incorporate dry ingredients in small increments. Otherwise it can kind of dry out and it'll get kind of clumpy. With a cake batter, obviously, you don't want that. Now, you'll note this looks a little dry. I'll go ahead and add about a half of a cup of coconut oil. And my coconut oil has been melted already, so that's why it's nice and clear and runs. You know, at room temperature, coconut oil is actually a little bit more of a solid. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll slowly pour this in here. You'll notice this will kind of start to take stuff off the side of the bowl for you. All right, we'll go ahead and stop it. Pull the bowl down and go ahead and scrape the sides a little bit. Make sure we got all of our ingredients off the side and get it well mixed into the batter. Now this cake dough will look a little bit thicker than a normal red velvet batter, but that's okay. That's the difference between it being horrible for you and still not great for you, but better for you. It is a dessert after all. All right, we've got everything pretty well mixed, so we'll go ahead and get ready to put it in the oven. All right, now again, you can do this in either 2 or 3 layers, depending upon which you prefer. I am opting for a 2-layer cake, so I'll just take my batter and split it evenly between the 2 cake pans. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as close to evenly split as you can get, or split 3 ways as you can get, depending upon your preference. And then just take it and smooth it. Do the same. All right. Now before you put it in the oven, you're going to want to take the sides and wipe them down. Anything that's on the side is pretty much just going to burn once you get in the oven. All right, and now we're ready to go into the oven with our cakes. We're going to bake them at 325. We're going to start with about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we will rotate them. I'm going to put them on the center rack in the oven, but if you're at home and you only have a top and a bottom shelf, you can start on the top, start on the bottom, really doesn't matter. What we're going to do is rotate halfway through and change position in the oven just to make sure that they cook evenly. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and make the icing while we have our cakes in the oven. We're going to start with our cream cheese and add it to a clean mixing bowl. We'll go ahead and whip that. You can go ahead and just kind of let that go for a few minutes. You're going to want to try and get as much air into it to make it more like a whipped icing. I'd say we're going to whip this for probably about 1.5 to 2 minutes before we start adding the other ingredients. All right, and our cream cheese we started off with was softened. It was at room temperature already. Makes it a lot easier to mix. You'll notice that the mixer's having no problem whipping it up. So we've been mixing for about 1.5 minutes now. We'll go ahead, scrape the side of the bowl. All right, now we've got the sides of our bowl scraped. We'll go ahead and add in our vanilla Greek yogurt. We're using about 1/2 cup. We'll go ahead and let that mix with the cream cheese well. And you'll see it's getting a little fluffier now that we've added the yogurt in there. Okay, I'm going to turn it off and add in my vanilla extract. 2 teaspoons. You can always go with a little bit extra if you'd like. All right, now that we've got our vanilla mixed in, we'll go ahead and cut off the mixer again. You'll notice that I keep stopping the mixer while I add ingredients. That's because you would have a large cloud of ingredients if you tried to add them while it was still running. All right, now I've got a 1/2 cup of maple syrup. What we're gonna do is we'll keep this on low speed and we'll slowly pour this in while it is mixing. All right, now you can notice that there's 2 different colors in this mixing bowl. You've got most of your yogurt and cheese up on the sides, and it looks like the syrup's only mixed with about 1/2 of our icing. So we'll go ahead and we'll scrape the sides of our bowl again. Make sure we can get everything nice and incorporated well together. All right, now we'll crank up the speed on the mixer just a little bit and we'll let this mix for maybe about 1 minute or 2. So as this mixes, you'll notice that it starts to thicken up a little bit. You want it to be a thick enough consistency that you can work with it, like a traditional icing, so that you can spread it on the cake. This icing is a little thinner than your normal icing, being that it doesn't have all the confectioner sugar in it, but it is still quite tasty. Another thing you can do is if you're having trouble getting it to the right consistency, you can also put it in the refrigerator and let it cool down some. Obviously, since we started with room temperature cream cheese, this is a little bit warmer and it will be a little bit runnier than it would be if it were in the refrigerator. All right, and it looks like ours might be a little too warm, so we're gonna try and put it in the refrigerator for a few minutes and see how it looks then. All right. So our cakes are ready to come out of the oven. This is what your finished product should look like. One way you can check to make sure it's done all the way is take a toothpick, put it in the middle of the cake, push all the way to the bottom, pull up, and make sure you don't have any liquid batter come up with it. This is clean, nothing on it but cake. So we're all set. So what we'll do is we'll let these cool off. You can take them out of the pan after about 15 minutes or so. And then if you want to cool them even faster, you can go ahead and put them in the refrigerator or the freezer for about an hour or two in the freezer, and maybe about 2 to 3 hours in the refrigerator. And that should get it cooled down enough so that you can go ahead and ice it. All right, so we've got our cakes out of the oven. Went ahead and took them out of the pan. They should come out of the pan pretty easily for you, especially with that parchment paper underneath. If not, you can always put them in the fridge or the freezer for 10 minutes or so. That should help it cool off enough that you can go ahead and pop it right on out of the pan. Once you get it out of the pan, you're going to take it. This is the top. So what I'm going to do is take a serrated knife and just try and get every cake, you know, has a little hump on the top. It's never completely even. So what you're trying to do is just basically cut off all of the excess that keeps the cake from being completely flat. And what this will do is help make sure that when you put the layers on top of one another, they don't run and you don't have like your top layer falling off of the cake. All right, you can save this for decoration, crumble it up on your icing if you'd like, or you can just discard it if you don't have any intention of doing that. All right, make sure we're nice and smooth. Okay, now, since this is obviously a little uglier than the other side, we'll make this the bottom of our cake. And what I'll do is I've got this cake carrier here. I'm going to take it with both hands. So now that I've cut it, it's a little bit more flimsy. All right, so now we've got it on our cake carrier, and we've got the bottom side up. And we'll go ahead and begin with our icing. One thing you'll notice is if you touch the icing with the spatula, it will most likely pick up some red crumbs off of your cake. So it's good to get a nice big glob of icing to start with before you spread it out too much. That way you won't get red crumbs all throughout it and get it all over your spatula. And just kind of go all the way to the edge. Doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to be in between layers. All right, now if you can see, I've got a lot of red specks in my icing that was on the spatula. So what you may want to do is to keep your rest of your icing from getting dirty, go ahead and grab another spatula, and that way you don't spread red crumbs throughout the whole cake. Okay, and I'm just going to repeat the same process with the other layer of the cake, taking off all the excess cake on top. Okay, take it, flip it, put it on top of our other layer. Now, I always start with a big glob of icing on top, and you'll notice that you can see the cake's kind of moving around a little bit. There's a couple ways you can get around that. You could go ahead and put it in the freezer for like 10 minutes. That'll help it set up some. You can put toothpicks in between the layers to try and hold it together. I don't really like that method just because then you have to find the toothpick once you're trying to eat cake, and nobody wants a toothpick in their cake. So once you spread it on the top, you'll see some starts to kind of start oozing down the side a little bit. You'll take your remaining icing and just try and coat the sides nice and evenly. You may use a icing spatula. Might actually work a little bit better than what I was trying to do. And just go around the whole cake and get it nice and evenly coated. And once you're done icing, you can go ahead and put it in the fridge or the freezer to make sure this icing's nice and set for you. You can decorate the top. You can crumble up the excess top of the cake if you like. You can put sprinkles, toasted pecans, whatever you'd like. And hope you enjoy this cake.